He might have to leave early as well, so I'll start anyway. Any declarations of interest over and above what we would expect? Okay, thank you. Minutes of the meeting on the 30th of November. Are they okay? Again, I'll take silence as assent. The action log, is there anything on it people want to pick up? I think most of it's answered, but okay, thank you. Questions from the public? I think we haven't got any, is that right? No questions from the public, okay. We've got what we've done again with this meeting, which I think worked well previous, is to try and get a theme to the meeting. And I think that worked well, enabled us to really get round the subject. And clearly there's a whole set of issues here. I think this is a critical issue. I think it's a critical issue for health. I don't think historically health's done anywhere near enough to think about its role. Have I gone off?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay. I don't think we've done anywhere enough to think about our role as a generator of economic activity, as opposed to simply the provision of healthcare. And there's a whole set of issues around that. We're starting to do some work on that. So I think this is a really important issue for us all. And it's also the kind of issue that actually we should be trying to tackle collectively. That I don't want the mayoralty, no offence, tackling on their own, or us doing a little bit of initiative over here. Our best chance of making a difference for our population, I think, is tackling this collectively. So there's a series of theme discussions today, which I hope will be helpful and valuable. Okay, who do we start with? Tina, are you at the back? I can't see you. Where are you? Hiya. So I just couldn't see you behind the pillar. Okay, let me hand over to you. Okay.
Afternoon, everybody. I'm Christine Joy, I'm Chief People Officer at the Integrated Care Board, and this is a presentation from myself and Tina from the Mayoral Combined Authority. We just want to update you on the Work Well bid, which was submitted on the 22nd of Jan. So just to put it into context, sorry, we'll share these slides afterwards as well, because there's some diagrams on these that might be a bit too small to see. So we'll share these afterwards. But if we move to the next slide, please. So the context of Work Well, just to remind people, at the spring budget in 23, the government announced over £2 billion to support disabled people and people with health conditions to start, stay and succeed in work, of which Work Well is a key component. The suite of measures will drive forward new approaches to work and health, and also includes, for example, introducing employment advisors into musculoskeletal clinical pathways, scaling up musculoskeletal community hubs to improve access, and introducing universal support, a new supported employment service. Next slide, please. Work Well, as part of that, is designed to support 59,000 disabled people and people with health conditions to start, stay and succeed in work. The Work Well programme will fund up to 15 pilot areas, which are known as vanguards. The services must be locally led in response to population need. There needs to be an increased focus on mental health and musculoskeletal conditions, which we know are the key drivers of ill health related to economic activity in South Yorkshire and generally, and are the focus of the major conditions strategy. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Christine. There are 3 objectives to Work Well. So if we look at objective one first, so this is for pilot areas to design and deliver a new early intervention, assessment and support service. So really intervening at that earliest possible point. It will provide participants with light touch, holistic support for their health-related barriers to employment through return to or thriving work plans, and act as a single joined-up view and gateway into the services that are available locally to manage the participants' specific needs. The service will be available to anyone with a disability or health condition who needs support to start, stay, or succeed in work, regardless of if they are claiming benefits. However, it is expected that the majority of people who will benefit from Work Well are those in work with health barriers, putting their work at risk, and those that are recently unemployed with health conditions. We've then got objective 2, which is around taking forward an integrated local work and health strategy. So this is around us supporting and driving a joined up approach to integrating the range of work and health services at a local level, including ourselves, the ICB, local authorities and JCP partners, which will make it easier for people to access the support that's needed, but also in addition to those people, businesses and providers that will be accessing those services as well. And then objective 3 is all around being part of a national learning programme. So a national support offer will be available to all pilot areas to support integrated planning and delivery. Shared learning will also help pilot areas and non-pilot areas to develop integrated approaches to work and health planning and delivery. Next slide, please. So the work that's been done to date is a group of partners have been convened, including ourselves at the MCA, the ICB colleagues, Job Centre Plus and all 4 local authorities. We've been meeting weekly to develop a bid in our response to this call, and we've also held provider sessions in each local authority area to make sure that what we're proposing is informed by those people actually delivering the services and working with these people on the ground. So, yep, the bid has been collaboratively developed and was successfully submitted on Monday. So that was in line with the deadline of the 22nd of January. In addition to that, it was submitted with letters of support from those key partners and others surrounding that too. Next slide, please. So apologies for this diagram. There's no way you will read what's on there, so we will circulate afterwards. However, I will talk you through the process. So starting off with the participants, as we mentioned, the participants benefiting from this programme are those that are either going to be in work with a health condition and struggling. So it may be that they're on the verge of going off sick, or they're off sick and wanting support to get back into work, or they'll be recently unemployed because of their health condition. There's you'll see as well there's referrals to the programme that are intended to come from multiple outlets, so from GPs, NHS talking therapies, JCP and local authorities existing programmes. The offer being accessed will be from a multidisciplinary team, and the programme proposed is to act as a low intervention work and health pilot to support those people already mentioned that are recently unemployed. Now, what we've said for this as well, in terms of those that are recently unemployed, as part of some of the analysis that we have done in the region, there is a gap between day 1 and 3 months. So we're saying as part of this, those that have recently come employed will fall into that gap between 0 to 3 months. And those that remain in work will have support for the length of 6 months as well. Anything that is an additional to that will be passed on to other other programmes. What this support mechanism also does is act as a triage into those existing programmes, because what we want to do is make sure this is joined up and joins those local provisions that are already out there, so not duplicating any work. So if, for example, upon assessment, it presents that a participant, for example, needs more higher intervention, then we'll refer them on to another programme that can provide the appropriate support for their needs. The programme as well, just to mention, will also refer into other support. So, for example, if somebody's requiring access to financial support, housing support, we'll make sure that that is all brought into the support offer. In addition to that, we are putting in a low-level intervention support for employers, because whilst we recognise that actually, we need to, put the wraparound support in for the participant, we need to make sure that businesses are well equipped and have the right resources and tools to support their employee to remain in work. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Tina. So I hope that you can glean a sense of where we've got to from the bid that we've put in. But Workwell is actually part of, and actually the strategic alignment with some of the conversations we've already had as an integrated care partnership is really strong. So you may remember back in September, we brought a paper around valuing our entire health and care workforce, anybody with a role, paid or unpaid, investing in the health of that. We even called that work and health. So it is the strategic alignment is really strong here. And we do have an opportunity to develop a learning and change role to help us develop the strategy further, which Workwell will be part of that strategy for us in South Yorkshire. And they'll work closely with partners and providers to make sure we have a really good strategy that builds on that discussion we started earlier. Because this covers physical and mental health, we have had to create a couple of additional governance groups and fit this into the governance structure that already exists in South Yorkshire. There is a slide, if you could move to the next slide, but I mean, I can't read this even zoomed up because it's an image that we've clipped. So we'll do our best to send this around so you can see that in more detail. So we've got the MCA structure on there, which shows the Skills Advisory Board, the local implementation boards and links to place committees. And we've also got a route up through the Integrated Care Board, who are responsible for the bid. And so this does need to be rooted in the Integrated Care Board governance. And so what we've agreed, because it sits between mental health and physical health, we've created a working group, which is multi-partner, multi-advisory, and will work on the operations of the bid. They'll report into an oversight group, which will make sure that we are achieving our performance indicators, that the contract is performing effectively, and that we're doing proper equality and quality impact assessments, that we meet all the clinical governance requirements and safeguarding and so on. And then that will route through the People, Workforce and Culture System Delivery Group, which already aligns to System Leadership Executive and then through into the Integrated Care Board and then the partnership. So it's convoluted, but we're largely using what already exists, with 2 additional groups being existed to drive this forward. So next steps, next slide, please. Next steps, the timescales in respect to the bid, we expect to hear whether we're successful or not in early April 2024. But whilst we wait for that, we have also been able to bid, and I think successfully bid for funding for a 1-year post for a leadership role that will help start to kick some of this off in preparation. As I said, we've already got a strategic ambition to be in this space anyway, so successful or not, this is work that we are going to be driving forward. So the ICB did submit that bid and was successful, so we do have some funds coming in for a post to support that. And I think it's important to note as well that our relationship with the Integrated Care Board and Gavin as putting in the bid and responsible for receiving the monies, we have asked and worked through some governments with Simca to be our delivery partner in taking this forward. So I just think it's important to note that. I think that's all we wanted to say, just to update you on that process, and happy to take any questions.
Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. And apologies for being late, and double apologies because I'm afraid I've got a UK Mayor's meeting at 2 o'clock. So I'm literally running in and then I'll go up to that meeting and then I'll have to run back down again. So I'm really sorry. I've not been able to just dedicate this whole time. So sorry, I'm going to have to hand over to Piers to chair. But for now, are there any questions or comments that anybody would like to ask? Yes,
please. So, I mean, I'd really welcome this. I see patients who would benefit from this service every day. That I'm doing clinical work. This week I saw a patient who was a medical secretary who was waiting for an orthopedic operation, but has got to the point where she can't manage to sit and type at the moment. She would certainly benefit from some extra help, but actually what she really needed was to have a surgery. And I suppose part of the question is, what can we do to try and help these people a little more to get up those waiting lists? But I really welcome the service. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I bring Stephen, Greg, and then Angela in, please?
Thank you. I think this is an enormously it can be enormously significant. This is an enormously important piece of work in terms of what's been presented. It's got detailed slides because it's detailed thinking that's gone into this, and the design's been, I know, has been brilliant in terms of understanding what would make this work. It is a very frustrating space, isn't it, that we're bidding for this work, given that this is a core part of what we know is needed, and is one of the key ambitions in the integrated care strategy, and we need to do this if we and deliver at an industrial scale if we're going to sort of make progress in terms of what we want to do in terms of that and that ambition. All said, actually, what I would like to say is I saw this work being developed, was a bit of a spectator on it, and it was an enormously brilliant joint effort, led by Tina and a team, with Christine, with the 4 local authorities, all working together to get this over the line under a very short timescale. And the document is a good document, and it's a sound bid. And I will be despondent if we don't actually get the thing, if I'm honest with you, because it's such a necessary thing. But I just wanted to put on record that it was a really brilliant process by which actually we as a system got together behind this and actually delivered it on time.
Thanks, Chair. Agree with Stephen. Massive credit to all those who made it work and got it this far. It's an amazing piece of work. 4 thoughts as you talked, yeah, and then maybe in the detail, which I haven't seen. There's sort of Is it a new service, or is it increasing capacity in existing services, or is it stitching together a complex world? And as you described it, I thought this is working win too. It may or may not be that, and it just kind of get the narrative straight on that, whether it is or it isn't. Yeah, I heard you talk a little bit about low-level support to employers. If you haven't already done so, talk to SOHAS, because that's what they do, and they're amazing at it. They've done it for 3 decades, and they're very, 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 very good at that. And then last thing, the sort of the balance between intervening with individuals, individual by individual, versus setting the right tone, setting the right policy on what good employment looks like, so as you don't have people becoming poorly with mental health, musculoskeletal problems and whatever. And probably a little bit of challenging work to do on that one, but an amazing effort to get it this far. Ditto, I agree, be despondent if we don't win.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, so it's really good to see this, and it's really needed. Just following up from what Greg said, I think it's not to be underestimated, the support that employers will need. From my personal experience in my work life, it's really difficult when people are off sick, and often if your organization or you're a small employer, there isn't really much support out there, but also it's about awareness raising, particularly for people with, long-term disabilities resulting from health problems. That is really important, because sometimes employers can think that it's really complicated to accommodate people with, additional needs because of medical history, but actually the adjustments sometimes are really small, and can, help the employers as well as the employee.
Thank you. Yeah, Pearson.
I think this is great work. It was aimed at a particular group. I remember starting my first job as a community worker in Liverpool in the late 70s. And I go back to Liverpool now, and there were people who were unemployed then who are still unemployed now, and whole families and generations. So I know it's separate from this, but can we not lose sight of the very long term unemployed, and is there anything we can do differently to try and bring them back into the workforce, or frankly, in some cases, into the workforce for the first time? Because I think that's a significant issues in some communities, and I see it in some of our communities as well. So I understand this is not geared at that, but I think it's a fundamental issue of health inequality as well. We've allowed it to develop as a country over, well, certainly since the 80s would be, at least in my view.
Well, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yes.
Yeah.
Colleagues online in a second, sorry.
Yes.
Yes, just to sort of pick up on that. So the Work Well is supposed to also be a vehicle to develop a broader work and health strategy for the region. So a lot of these other issues should hopefully get pulled into that broader piece of work.
Thanks, Ruth. Nigel.
Yeah, cheers for that. I mean, yeah, I mean, I totally obviously welcome this because I think it's very much needed. What would be useful, sort of like, is to get a picture of the 15 pilot areas now they're spread across South Yorkshire. However, what doesn't spring out to me initially is the importance of SEAG and IAG, and that being impartial and independent, and obviously those people that are working in that area, that they're qualified to level 4 and 6 and able to do that effectively. Because what's really important is we recognise, and I suppose this is focusing what Pierce just said, is that in terms, sometimes working with this client group, it could be a very, very long process. So it's not just getting somebody into a job. It's about sustainability and certainly for retention for the employer. And my concern is that, you know, I mean, obviously it's a bid to DWP, and they're going to have targets around this particular client group, but we need to look at other options outside of work as well. And I understand fully the remit within obviously the bid, but there is other options for people to take that long road back, and that could be around education and training and certainly volunteering, you know, particularly for those people that's been long-term unemployed. And to me, it's about building that confidence up over that sustained period of time for them to actually move on. It's almost like, you know, the moving down a pathway. It's a journey, really. So I think I'm really keen to get a grasp of where the IAG sits with this, because I think initially that should be at the start of the process, and whether it will be independent and obviously impartial. The second thing is, I mean, when somebody goes down that journey, I suppose, because potentially it could be a long track way, and you know, it's almost like 3 steps forward and 2 steps back in some cases. It's important that key worker is there at every single point, because you know and I know, particularly if you're working with long-term unemployed people or people that's been out of work for a while, people lose confidence. So they'll need an advocate working with them, almost like a mentor or a key worker, to sort of like meet up regularly with the employer and obviously sort of like voice their concerns, and potentially the employer may have concerns as well that they'll need to sort of like casework around. So whilst I welcome it, I think the impartiality of it and the IAG and the SEAG, that needs to sort of like step out to me, for me to have confidence in it. And certainly, I guess, for a lot of people, because, you know, we're not, with some of this client group, we're not talking about just getting them a job. And some of those jobs could be sort of like, you know, minimum wage, or living wage as it's called now. This is about long-term sustainability and retention for employers. And at the end of the day, it's about a career pathway rather than just a job pathway.
Thank you, Nigel. Will, were you looking because you wanted to come in, or have I misunderstood that?
I'm looking for my kit. No, it was just a reflection really, and I think it's about the wider opportunities from this work as well. I was just we drew out the sort of the connection very clearly between our Bold Ambition 4, which is about our entire workforce. But I just wanted to make the obvious point around how this connects and is a golden thread through our other ambitions as well. Particularly, and if we think about, you know, how we're trying to sort of really maximise the opportunity for people in work and support that. And I'm just thinking about the prevention aspects as well. And some of these people will also be in families and have children. So actually it connects right the way through all of our bold ambitions. And therefore, in that wider opportunity that we've got, I think I wanted to make that obvious connection with some of the work that we think that we can do together in all of those different spaces.
Sorry,
Also, I agree with you first, Chris. Thank you very much. As people have said, it's fantastic bid, really impressed with it, and let's hope successful. I'm not sure if there's a fallback position, but let's not worry about that now. Just to follow up the point that was made over there, that I think it is important that there's meld and fit in with everything else we're doing, so it's not one bit pulling away from another bit. But also, when we look at putting the people into employment, are we looking at insisting that the employers pay at least the living wage, if not, which would be far, far better at the real living wage? Now, I appreciate that will stop some employers coming forward, but I think as people are committed to supporting people on low incomes, a real push to insist that any employment is at least the living wage, even better, the real living wage.
Thank you, David. Okay, I mean, it seems like we're all agreed that this is a good thing, which is great. I mean, back to Will's point, I think I was upstairs. The reason I was late was because I'm talking to a guy called Dharmesh, who's a senior official in DLUC, and so he was asking me very pointed questions about the role of health in my agenda, our agenda, and you know, as they're saying, actually, this is all about economic growth and helping people to grab the opportunities that we are creating. I hope in South Yorkshire, and you know, nowhere is that more important than clearly through this piece of work. So, I hadn't actually considered in all a huge amount of detail the possibility that we wouldn't then win the bid, but now people have said that, I'm now also equally despondent about the possibility that we might not get it. But anyway, we'll cross that bridge as and when. But thank you for the work, and it is a genuinely good thing. I think we all agree. Okay, moving on to the Pathways to Work Commission. If we could please, and I'm sorry, I'm going to have to run back upstairs at this point, which is a shame because, as you know, I am a huge supporter of the Pathways to Work.
I mean, this continues very much with the same theme. The Pathways to Work Commission, you've seen a presentation previously at this board, but it's an independent commission which has a strategic focus on Barnsley's economically inactive population of working age, but it also is adopting a South Yorkshire lens on the issue of economic inactivity. And I think it's just probably worth reminding ourselves that broadly speaking, you know, apart from the long-term unemployed, the entrenched that are entrenched unemployed that Pierce was talking about, economic inactivity is associated with mental health issues, particularly with young people, also with people who are due to long-term health conditions are moving in and out of the workforce in some instances, and then also people who are either caring for families, you know, the young children, or caring for elderly parents or people who have a long-term health condition. So the issue of health and economic inactivity are inextricably connected. The commission was set up in the summer of this year. It has one key line of inquiry, and it is to really deeply understand in Barnsley, you know, how do we in Barnsley enable all of our working age population, particularly those who are furthest away from the labour market, to achieve and to follow pathways back into employment. But as I said before, it also has a South Yorkshire lens. Next slide, Max, please. This slide tells you, I think there's two things. One is the commission is chaired by Alan Melbourne, who has a lot of experience in this area. Oliver is also a commissioner bringing his South Yorkshire lens, but it also brings together a range of experts from the health sector, from the voluntary community sector, and from a whole range of organisations and think tanks, including the Work Foundation and the Resolution Foundation, and also organisations such as, so yeah, those are the key organisations that are involved. SWIFT are also involved as well. And so it's commissioning a whole body of research that's drilling into this area, but it's also hearing evidence from a whole range of partners and people who have experience and understand this issue in a very, very live way. Just to give you a sense of the kind of scale of the research, CADA Research have conducted a range of in-depth one-to-one interviews. So it's a range of one-to-one interviews, focus groups. So we're getting a lot of research from lived experience and people who have experience of being economically inactive, although they may not want to characterise themselves as such. We're also carrying out a business survey to understand how employers see the issue. We're gathering local data on Barnsley and working with a data crunching organisation called Palantir, who are well positioned with government. And we're also procuring some large scale polling of those who are economically inactive across South Yorkshire, as well as some ongoing desk-based research. So there's a significant amount of qualitative and quantitative research with a focus on Barnsley and South Yorkshire that is drilling into the issue. And we've had 5 sessions to date, and our 6th session of evidence hearing, supported by Mariana, and this group is going to look at that relationship between being economic inactivity and work and health. So next slide. This timetable maps out what the kind of content of the health and work session, health and economic inactivity looks like. So we'll be looking at data, and we've got a keynote speaker, Dame Carol Black, coming in. We're looking at the idea of stemming the flows. You know, how do you reduce through prevention the pipeline of people who are moving into economic inactivity as well? So, and that's the notion of how do you tackle mental health issues for young people early in their life rather than much later when they're, you know, entrenched economically inactive. We're having lunch with a whole group of key local health stakeholders, and Marianne and others in this room have been instrumental in identifying the invite list for that from across South Yorkshire. And we're also looking at some of the strengths and weaknesses of existing programmes and initiatives, and also how we can join up some of the providers so that we create a more seamless offer for those who are economically inactive. And we'll also be looking at where the opportunities lie for innovation as well. The next couple of slides capture, if you can move on, capture the initial emerging findings from the CADA research work about how people talk about the experience of being economically inactive or not being in work themselves. And I won't read out every single one of them, but I think, a number of people talk about the need for guidance, for a guide, a coach, a mentor, the need for support, but also about how they become demotivated, and the kind of psychological and emotional impact of being economically inactive and out of work. And there are some quotes there that where people talk about the value of, particularly of community support and the voluntary and community sector and local organisations as being a real powerful first point of contact for them in finding their way back into work. So that's just a bit of a canter through where the Commission are. The final report is due in July, August of this year, and we'd be really happy to bring in a kind of a fuller presentation on what the content of the final report is. But what we are identifying early stage is that a place-based approach is most likely to be the most effective, where you bring the system together at a hyper-local level. So I think that's just an initial emerging finding. Any questions?
Yeah, Kathy, any questions? Thanks, Kathy. That was really helpful, although we did have a report it last time. Any questions for Kathy on that? Greg?
Go on. Thanks, dead helpful. And likewise, I'd heard some of that, I think, in the previous meeting. Three thoughts as you talked. One, the just routes back into work implying paid employment or volunteering, which I think, as Councillor Ball said, is kind of really valuable, and let's not underestimate that. The second, maybe linked, role of the benefit system DWP in this, especially if volunteering. No, you can't volunteer because your benefits will be cut. Well, I won't volunteer. So DWP have got to be in this in various ways. Third one is a sort of a tricky, again, a spin. I've raised this earlier, sort of the onus is on employee or individuals. Economically inactive implies an element of choice and all that kind of stuff, or shift the blame onto individuals for not being economically active. Where are employers? It's kind of hard, employers, it's a two-way thing, social responsibility of employers and all that kind of stuff. Is that in? I guess it is.
Yeah, it is. I'll work back. Volunteering is absolutely fundamental to what we're looking at, and particularly through the lived experience lens. And that's partly why it's called Pathways to Work. So it identifies volunteering as a key pathway. I think the second thing on the DWP is, they've got a lot of skin in the game, and we've got great relationships with DWP. The critical issue is that it's impossible, while you can access DWP data online, they won't release some of their local data. So we're having to work around that data issue. And one of the things we're going to be looking to do is to influence, how DWP work at a national level and at a policy level with other services like the Department for Health and Care, or with DLUC as well. And thirdly, yes, absolutely. We had a previous session focused on businesses and what it meant to be a good employer, and what employers actually and businesses have to do to support people who might. And again, that's partly where we're looking at some of the flows, because often people are in work, but because they become disheartened or because they're dissatisfied in work, can sometimes drift out of work. And how do you manage to support people through businesses as well, to make sure that they can find their way back into work, and meaningful work we're talking about.
Thank you. Any other questions for Kathy? Again, Sheena, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, what's the kind of hope for the outcomes from this? Because I think there's potentially lots of things, and it speaks also to the point we were making earlier about, you know, getting people back into work who are the farthest from the employers market, but also it's also about supporting potential employers with flexible opportunities to enable people to get back into work, and trying to think about what's the art of the possible, really, I guess. And so I'm wondering, in terms of the outcomes, is it going to come up with some of those solutions, or is it going to be more around the principles around what we need to do collectively? And because I think, you know, obviously there's potential for all sorts from the approach.
I mean, it's a broad question, but what I'd say is that one, we are definitely looking to be able to identify solutions in terms of program design and how interventions might be designed to really be effective. So there will be a solution focused commission session, which is just about that, about program design and designing interventions. But, you know, Alan Milburn and the Commission are also really interested in looking at how we can, what are the kind of interventions at a national level in policy that might actually have an impact and change how the system works together as well. So there might be proposals about policy and system change as well. So yeah.
Stephen.
So this is a question, Kathy. So a lot of this is going to sort of butt up against those things that you just described in terms of system conditions, isn't it, really? Even down to the dreadfulness of data sharing and stuff like that. I'm just wondering out loud, is one of the products that come out of the Commission is not an offer to government to trial and test different ways of doing stuff? Is that right across, and that would be across the South Yorkshire footprint, I presume? Question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're looking at it through a very specific Barnsley lens, but obviously the idea would be that any of the solutions that emerge from the Commission could be tried and tested across South Yorkshire. I think working with the Work Well programme is almost like the beginning of a test programme. If we were successful with that, because it has been collaboratively developed, would give us a good starting point. But what you'd want to do is start to apply some of the data, the insights, the policy change, and make an argument to government that we're really a trailblazer here and a pathfinder, and actually ask government, you know, could we work together with them to trial a new approach and new innovations in the system and at place level that would really allow us to tackle this issue in a meaningful way that would genuinely have both social and economic benefit.
Will.
Thanks, Piers. It's just a reflection, really, and it's just about our open-mindedness. I think in some ways this is a gift, isn't it, for us as an integrated care partnership, particularly in relation to our bold ambition, because we probably would be doing something like this anyway. And therefore, it's just being really mindful that whilst this is something that is coming out of Barnsley, we're really open to the learning that's coming out of it. The session in February that was referred to, remember we had it was September, October time at our ICP meeting in Doncaster, where we had an update. Then we were asked as a set of partners to engage in that session. So we're engaging that as a South Yorkshire. So I guess I'm just reflecting my own mindset, which is I see this as being really helpful for the work that we're trying to do here in this space, so that when, you know, some of that learning does come out, we're really, really open and receptive to it, I guess.
I think we're also really open to sharing the research, you know, the lived experience research, the quantitative research, the polling, etc., back with this group, but obviously with some analysis and some synthesis of those findings, filtered through the professional experience and expertise of the Commission, because I think that could be really useful.
Alexis.
First of all, I'd to say I think it's a really helpful presentation. I actually really loved the learning from this. I think it's a great piece of work, Kathy, and I'll certainly be in touch afterwards to learn more about it. One of my thoughts was from this was actually I was thinking about our local Change and Futures programme, which you know, and that's working with people experiencing multiple disadvantage. And I just wondered, I think there's actually learning from this programme that I think we could take into some of that, which is also like a national kind of programme. So for me, there's a bit of how can we, you know, share learning across South Yorkshire, but also look at this in the context of there's quite a few different programmes around, and how can we start to think about some shared learning across the piece. And so that was just a thought and a comment, because I was kind of looking at that programme thinking I could take this into Change Our Futures and actually you know, that could support people experiencing multiple disadvantage to ultimately to live the life that they want to live and improve wellbeing outcomes. So I think hopefully that's an opportunity that could come out from this discussion today.
Brilliant. Thank you, Alexa.
Okay, thanks. Any other points? Sorry, yeah.
Hi, I'm Rachel Leslie from Doncaster Council. Just wanted to pitch in another offer as well. So Doncaster had a Fairness and Wellbeing Commission process last year that concluded at the end of the year. There were living well focus sessions that included work and health focus, and I've offered through Christine as well and Tina our findings and outcomes from that. Lots of things in Doncaster already, things that have worked, things that haven't. So a whole heap of learning around there, personas that were created with real stories of people in Doncaster, various different mixed methods. So would like to pitch that in to this as well, both in terms of methodology, findings and outcomes.
Really happy to feed that back. I think the strategic alignment here is, as Will said, with our prevention agenda, but also with our inclusive economy pillar in the strategy as well. And it's also an area where the two intersect in a way. So I really would love to get a copy of that actually and feed that back into the process.
Thank you, Rach. Any other points? Kathy, really helpful update. We definitely want to hear again of how it's going. So do come back. Thank you. Can we move on to agenda item 7, employment for everyone. Kelly, hiya. It's all right. Take your time. Sit yourself down. Make yourself comfortable. And then no, it's all right. That's grand. Don't worry. Don't worry. Nothing wrong with moving my director of people. It's all right. Could you switch the?
Oh, there we go. Okay, so for people that don't know me, I'm Kelly Glover. I'm the Learning Disability and Autism Programme Director for South Yorkshire ICB, but also represent working across health, social care and education within my role. And I'm going to let my colleagues introduce themselves. So Jodie.
Yeah, good morning everyone. No, good afternoon rather, sorry. My name's Jodie. I'm a salary worker at Speak Up back in Rotherham. I'm a co-founder for Employment is for Everyone, as it was myself who came up with the name for it. I'm also a governor for the Rotherham Opportunities College, and I'm also a trainer for the Oliver McGowan mandatory training.
Hello everyone, my name is Sally Wormley. I'm the Principal Officer for Inclusion at Speak Up. I helped to found Employment is for Everyone, and I also support Kelly's team in terms of making sure that people with learning disabilities and autism have a say through all of the ICB's priority work that Kelly leads on.
Hi everyone, I'm Harry Clarkson. I'm also from Speak Up and from part of Employment is for Everyone movement.
Okay, so we've come to talk to you today about employment is for everyone, and it seems quite timely that we've had lots of conversations about employment, and I guess we are representing a population that is really underserved. I think there are lots of fantastic offers that happen across South Yorkshire to get people into employment, but I think we have to recognise that we need to do something a little bit differently for these individuals. So Jodie's going to introduce what we're going to talk about in today's presentation, and it'll be a bit of a quadruple act in terms of running through it.
And thank you, Kelly. So we'd like to talk to you about what Employment is for Everyone is, why the movement's needed, how the movement is helping people in South Yorkshire, some of our key achievements to date, our plan for 2024, and our ask if we need your help to drive the required positive changes. So Employment is for Everyone. We're a social movement aimed at improving employment opportunities for people with learning disabilities and autistic people in South Yorkshire. We're a social movement because anyone can be part of it, and we know it will always succeed if people across the system sign up and support the movement. And we also have a video that we'd like to play for you all.
Employment means that I own my own home.
I can socialise with my friends.
I can go on holiday. I can make my own choices. I'm free to live my life.
I can start a family.
I have the skills to succeed.
Thank you very much. I'll now hand over to Harry.
Cheers, Jodie. So we think, oh, sorry. Cheers, Jodie. So we think that video is a really great summary of basically what this whole movement about, why we're doing it and why it's so important. A little bit about where it started. I think the slides will come back on, yeah. So in 2019, the Learning Disability and Autism Programme for South Yorkshire held a regional event to talk about what's important to people, wanted to capture people's voice and what means the most to them. And employment came out as a key theme for those people. That it was a key priority and that we really need to look at how we make the pathways and the information for people a lot more easy and accessible. And similarly, people were talking to us about there are numerous barriers to employment.
So in 2019, there's lots of information. We have loads and loads of amazing programmes across South Yorkshire, but information's in lots of different places. So people and families were telling us it's really difficult to find. Where do we go to get this information? Who can support us into employment? So this is really essentially the start of our movement. So if we could have the next slide, please. So across South Yorkshire, we know we've got some really good data in terms of learning disability, and we know that our employment statistics for people with learning disabilities are really low in comparison to our general population. But yet we know we've got some fantastic individuals out there who want to work, who want that opportunity. Lots of young people coming through our education system want to be able to up to work and to aspire. We know that our local businesses are really struggling to recruit. And so this is why we've been trying to take a different approach. So we've been working with businesses, we've been working with all of our employment leads across South Yorkshire, within each of our local authorities. We've been working with people with lived experience to try to come together to find the solutions. So we're kind of sharing that load across South Yorkshire, but we've also got a really clear offer to people and families.
Next slide, please. Thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you. And then just to follow on from that, when we're looking at the data, so MenCap's 2019 Big Learning Disability Survey found that 23% of working age adults with learning disabilities had a paid job, which, as we know, across South Yorkshire, that figure is a lot lower. And similarly, if you look at things like the Joseph Browntree research in 2023, it talks about the massive impact that has on people being in poverty and very deep poverty. So again, just a couple of the key facts from there, such as 62% of people who experienced destitution during 2022 were disabled or had a chronic health problem. The image on the left is from the PHE tool, and that just kind of reiterates the kind of huge economic benefits to people being into employment. So if you just look at that one graphic, that tool kind of says, you know, if you get somebody back into employment, it saves £12,035 per year, never mind, obviously, the personal impact that it has for people. With a lot of the people we're working with as well, that figure could actually be considerably higher because a lot of people will be accessing adult social care or other types of support as well. So kind of what we're trying to say is if we can get people independent and working, the kind of wider impact and the social impact will be even wider than that. Next one, please.
So in terms of how the movement developed, so we set up the South Yorkshire Employment Project Development Group, and as I said, that has a range of stakeholders on it, people with lived experience, family members, members of DWP, all of our employment leads, and we tried to bring together a core group of stakeholders. And then we thought, well, how do we start to share this information to people? It's all over the place. So we created a website and we founded Employment is for Everyone, and we launched it in June 2022. And Christine kindly launched the movement for it. We had over 170 organisations and people come to the launch event. So in terms of the website, the website is for anybody across South Yorkshire. It has information for businesses. So if businesses are wanting to employ people, if businesses are wanting to become more inclusive, if businesses want to just generally access training, we've tried to, we've gone to all of as many providers as we know. We know there are still people out there that we haven't spoken to, but we've asked people to kind of share with us their offer, and we will put it up onto the website so that people can access it. We've also got an area for people that are looking for work. So for example, if you want to find a job, you're not sure which organisations can support you, we've asked all of our supported employment organisations if they can host their information up there. A lot of people have already done that. And, you know, we've got probably 11 at the minute positive stories. So when people are employing people, we're sharing the positive stories and the impact that it has. And we've also got an area that will be, that is being created, sorry, for businesses to really kind of promote the businesses that are doing really well across South Yorkshire, to share that best practice.
I think just to quickly add to that, the positive stories, what we're trying to get across there is we want to inspire more people, and we're also showing businesses, people are working in all kinds of different sectors and industries. So there's a lot of kind of, unfortunately, there exists a lot of stereotypes as to what type of jobs people think people with learning disabilities or autism might go into. But what we're showcasing through those examples is with full range of sectors and industries, and we've got about 5 or 6 that we're waiting just to get finalised and agreed to. So that's like people with a learning disability running their own business, creating their own enterprises, every type of sector, because we want to get that message across to people to inspire them, but also to businesses to get more of them engaged and make them realise they're missing out on this massive pool of really talented people. Next slide, please.
Sorry, just to add to that, at the event, we knew we had two different types of people in the audience. We had people from our public sector organisations and we had businesses that were there. So our ask to people on the day was, if you're from a public sector organisation, could you look at how you might employ people with learning disabilities or autism within your organisation? If you can't do that, what might you need to be able to do that? And if you still aren't able to do that, how can we make the things that how can you make the processes and the things that you're doing more inclusive? So that might be through co-production or focus groups or different things. And we also said that to our businesses. So we offered people a range of different ways in which across South Yorkshire people can make their businesses or organisations more inclusive.
So then we read the South Yorkshire ICB strategy, and we got really excited by it because employment for people, the people that we were working with, was part of that. And that's what we really needed. We need something that we could then pull all of this work together and put it under something that kind of would then make sense to everybody across the whole region. So the bit that obviously that we're focusing on is reduce the gap in employment rates of those with a physical or mental health long-term condition, as well as those with a learning disability, and the overall employment rate by 25%. So when we ask the question around that, we don't think that that's referring to people with a learning disability, not autistic people, but our movement is around working with both people, and similarly the work that we do with Kelly and partners is all focused on people with learning disabilities and autism. So we would really, for us, we absolutely had to improve combine both. Sorry, get it out eventually. Next slide, please.
So what we did was we looked at what you'd said within your ICP in your plan. And then we looked at all the data that we have across South Yorkshire. So we've got some phenomenal data in terms of annual health checks. We've got some really good data in terms of across our GP practices. We worked with Barbara Coyle, who'd helped to write your strategy. We worked with people like Anita Winter, Philip Crabtree, to look at everything that we know so that we could try to understand, well, what does that actually mean for people in South Yorkshire? So in terms of that data, we applied the metrics, and so for people with learning disabilities across South Yorkshire for the next 5 years, that kind of equates to about 1,487 jobs for people with learning disabilities. We then looked at the data for autism, which isn't where it we don't know as much about autistic people as we do people with learning disabilities. We know that across South Yorkshire our prevalence is about 4%, but actually for children and young people it's about 6%. So we took some national data in terms of looking at what Autistica was saying, and they estimate about 21.7% of autistic people are employment, and we applied those metrics with Barbara to what we know about people with autism in South Yorkshire. And so we combine the two, and so across the next 5 years, we would be looking at, on average, around 5,878 jobs for people with learning disabilities and autistic people across South Yorkshire. Now, when you look at where we are and where you look at where we've got to go to, that is a big, ambitious target. But that doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't have an ambitious target for people with learning disabilities and autism across South Yorkshire. And as long as we're moving in a direction that is heading towards that, then that's okay. And if we're not heading towards that, then what we're trying to do is work with people to understand, well, why aren't we getting there? And what do we need to do to change things? And that's where we then feed that information back into Kelly and to her team and to people like you that are sat around the table today.
And similarly, when we've been working with each area's employment leads, they're saying that that's really useful actually to translate that what's in the strategy into a target that they can then understand and how that works, because each area is already running their own projects as well, and it's how that all fits together to form a South Yorkshire picture, so that we're not focusing just purely on silo. We're looking at how we can do this together across the piece. So their kind of feedback that was really useful. And similarly, if we can kind of translate some of the data around that, that means we can probably have a better idea of where the gaps are and where the issues are, so then we can kind of create better solutions for people moving forward. Next slide, please. So crucially for us, all of our work is co-produced with people with lived experience. So by that we mean people with learning disabilities, with people with autism. They're involved in absolutely everything that we do within this project. And some of the kind of key achievements that we've done today. So we're working with loads of different people, and through that we're creating loads of different regional tools, because again, that's what people are feeding back to us the gaps are. So for example, we're working with all the employment leads like we talked about, and what's helping with that is because we're working with people at so many different levels, it means that we can create solutions at one level, but then if it goes beyond that, we can very quickly escalate it to a very senior level to things that we can't move kind of at play space. So that's working really well. We're kind of developing a growing network across South Yorkshire. So as we've been doing this movement, the interest has just exploded. It's just grown and grown and grown, because people who have been involved in this work for a long time are saying to us, this is the approach that you need to take. If you don't take this kind of South Yorkshire collaborative approach, we can't get to where we need to. Our website is very young. We only launched it about a year ago, 18 months ago. Very young anyway. And we've already had 3,000 people accessing that, since June 2022, which gives you some inkling into the kind of need for this kind of information that we're putting together. And we're co-creating, like I said, tools and resources for where there are gaps. So just one example for that is an autistic person reached out to the ICB and said, I can't find an employment wellness action plan that works for me as an autistic person. So the way that we can then respond to that is we throw that out across this network and we go, who wants to help us co-create one then? Because if there isn't one out there that's right, let's create one and fill that gap. And that's what we're doing. We've nearly finished that. We're doing that in 2 versions as well to make sure that it meets accessibility needs. And similarly, we, as a working group, are looking to co-create vocational profile tools and an employer toolkit with partners. Because again, what people are saying is they're coming up with where they're finding gaps, with things that are blocking people getting into work in their area. So instantly we can find out what level does this need to go to and form a working group to then create that solution. We can then share it on the website, share it with partners, so hopefully the impact will be really wide. Next slide, please.
So I think, as Harry's touched on, all of our work is in response to a gap and what people are telling us is needed. And I think some of your questions from the presentation before, our businesses across South Yorkshire are really key to this. So businesses told us at the event in June that they were being approached by multiple organisations asking for multiple offers, asking whether or not they could offer an apprenticeship, whether or not they could offer a supported internship, whether or not they could employ people. And that actually put them off as businesses. They were saying, we want to be inclusive, but actually this approach is putting us off. We want a coordinated approach to do this. So through the working group that we've created, we've started to do that. So we have got some phenomenal businesses across South Yorkshire, big businesses that are coming forward and saying, we want to be involved in this work. So for example, GXO, Equans, they're international businesses. So we've had over 1,000 people attend our events and training days and experience days. So for example, like Equans had said, you know what, we've not really had many people with learning disabilities or autism apply for our apprenticeship roles. What can we do? So we worked with them and with the other organisations across South Yorkshire to develop like a 6-week programme with them, where people can actually go in and get to know, go on a site visit, get to know that organisation, and then if they want to, apply for an apprenticeship role. We had GXO approach us and say, yeah, we would like to make our business more inclusive. We've got some jobs that that people might be interested. So we did a similar thing with GXO, and 8 people were offered positions just before Christmas. So we've had 32 job offers across multiple businesses. We've had 12 people into employment. We've got 6 supported internships. And just as another example, GXO employed people before Christmas. It went really, really well. But they've come back to us and said, do you know what, actually our training and development team needs some more training on how to work with people. Can you identify somebody that can help us to do that? So we've put that back out across South Yorkshire, and then an organisation's come in and delivered that training. So businesses are on board with us and they're wanting to offer to continue to offer this, and it's showing that they're changing their processes internally. They're reflecting on their recruitment and they're thinking, you know what, we do want to make a difference to people. So we think if we can continue to work with organisations, it will start to change culture across businesses and start to have a significant impact on employment for people.
I'm going to have to come in. You can see how passionate we are, and we're obviously overrunning now, so I'm going to rein it back in if that's okay a little bit. I think just to kind of summarise, I think we're getting the gist of what this movement's about. It's a cultural movement, and we know that we need to shift the culture in South Yorkshire. I guess the only way we're going to do that is working together. I think some of the stuff, Kathy, you were talking about, and some of the stuff that Christine and Tina have spoken about. So it is about working together, and I absolutely acknowledge place delivery, really important, where people live, really important. But in a world where we're living with limited resources, whether that be financial, whether that be people, we've got to work smarter. We've got to come together and do some of this stuff together. So I guess in terms of, you know, what we wanted to give an update today, they've made significant progress. All this is kind of people led. This is what people have told us. This is not what we are saying from a local authority or an ICB. This is kind of being led by the people, you know, that are really important in this situation. But I guess to help us move this forwards now, we absolutely need some kind of strategic buy-in. We need leadership to kind of sign up to that cultural movement. So I guess in terms of some of the we're not asking for money because we know that there's very limited money, and we know that's a really difficult ask. We are doing everything we can to try and source to fund this. It's a really small cost in the grand scheme of things. If you look at how much it costs versus the people that we could get into employment, it's peanuts. But the offer is unique because we are supporting businesses. We are giving them the tools, the accessibility. We're supporting people to kind of get into employment and maintain employment, because there's no point in getting people in if we can't then maintain that employment and support kind of both parties within that. But you know what we really want to ask as well is that we are the biggest employers. The public sector is the biggest employer. You know, we need to lead by example with this. We need to kind of put our money where our mouth is. If we're saying we're going to increase it in our strategies, we need to then commit, and we need to be recruiting those individuals. But I am also going to ask as well that we have some kind of support to help us fund some of this stuff. Co-producing things should be at the heart of everything we do, whether that be employment or any other development, you know, but we need to kind of fund that. We need to pay people for doing that work with us if we want their experience within that. So we do want some support around helping us find some funding. We are doing everything we can to fund stuff ourselves, and we have got, fingers crossed, some potential funding coming through. But we need people to sign up to a pledge, you know, as public organisations, that we're going to commit to this, and we're going to commit to that by changing our, you know, kind of processes, our policies, by making employment accessible, by employing people with learning disabilities and autism. We've kind of drafted a pledge which we want to share with you all after this meeting to take back to your organisations. We obviously, your input into it is equally as important, but we just really want people to sign up to the movement. Is it the right thing for South Yorkshire? We think it is. do you think it is? And then just, let's take it from there. And we will share, obviously the slides will be shared for you to look at all the other stuff.
Kelly, thank you. And I love the passion, by the way. So don't apologise for it. That's exactly what we need to see. David.
So David Crack, Chief Medical Officer at the ICB. So just a couple of comments back. We often group LD and autism together. Then there is some overlap, but they're not quite the same. So just make a point of that we need to respond to people's needs, not the condition itself. I was having a little bit of thinking, my GP by background, sort of thinking about, we do have this annual learning disability annual review. Could we build in that connection to the workforce offer within that, keep it to health and well-being? And then there's something about the final thing is, we need to make reasonable adjustments in the work we're doing to accommodate this, not see this as something extra on the side. So thanks.
Andy.
Hi, really just an offer from myself and my team to support you to get the message out. On Monday, I'm pulling together the comms leads from the 9 Acute Trust, the 4 local authorities from Simca, just to discuss how we can work together closer. And this is one of the things that we can really do together to try and drive that social movement. So I'll link in with you separately, but just to put on record that you've got our support in how you want to work.
Sheena.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it was great to hear all of your experiences and the passion. And I think I don't think you'd find anyone around the table who's not committed to employment for everyone. I think that's an ambition that we could all get behind. I guess I'm interested because I think it's important to us as an organisation. We're one of the hospitals in the South Yorkshire patch. We're a big employer in the place as well, and it is important to us. But we also do some of this work with Project Search, for example. So just interested in how that fits into the sort of umbrella that you've described around sort of employment for everyone.
So Project Search have been integral to our work. They helped us to create some of the things that are on the website. For example, some of the answers to employers, where employers might be not sure about taking somebody on a supported internship or offering employment to somebody. I think we have Project Search, we have multiple providers across South Yorkshire, all also wanting supported internships. And that's where some of that information is feeding into our project development group. So we know, for example, certain hospitals have got really fantastic offers, other hospitals don't. So it's then looking at that best practice and trying to share that with the other hospitals that might need some hand holding in terms of bringing people on board with that. And I think the other comment earlier about annual health checks, one of the things that we want to do with the website so that it's a holistic website is that we want to, if people sign up to the website in terms of looking for jobs, we want people to have an opportunity where they can sign up to receiving notifications. So it'll also remind people that they do an annual health check, or have you had your annual health check this year, or how's your mental health today? Don't forget that you've got these services across South Yorkshire. So it's a more holistic approach, and it's not just kind of looking at things in silo.
Yeah, and just to quickly add to that as well, we spoke to quite a few people in education leads, teachers, futures people. We've done a lot of futures events. So similar to that annual review thing question, it's about how we build that in. And what they were saying was they looked at the website and their feedback was enormously positive. They're like, this is what we need to be showing our young people moving forward. So that right at a really early age, the people and families are understanding they can have this aspiration. There is support out there, and this is the place that you can go to get all the information that you need for that. Really good point from somebody about reasonable adjustments as well. So that's kind of the education that we're having to do with employers still as well. An awful lot of the feedback is there's still a lot of that kind of stereotyping. They're thinking that reasonable adjustment is going to be some massive change to their building. It's going to cost them thousands of pounds. So we're building that into the information that we're giving to them. We're building that into the tools. So like the employment wellness action plan that we're doing with people, giving businesses real examples, because again, that's what we're working off feedback. They're telling us this is what we're not understanding. What does this mean? How do we do that? And that's how we're shaping everything. And then really great point about the hospital as well. I think Sally's already covered it, but we're working with all the employment leads in each area, and that was an example that we brought up. Somebody else was saying there's this brilliant example of this hospital doing this, and so immediately it's like, well, why can't that be replicated across South Yorkshire? Because immediately that's going to open up whatever, 10 or 100 jobs, whatever it might be, straight away. If we can get everybody taking that approach and sharing that good practice, you don't have to recreate the wheel then, do you? That employment lead can go and learn from that example, take that away back to their wherever they work and share that with that leads. And that's what's happening right now. We had a meeting with supporting internship leads last week, and that exact example came up. So that's again where we're really passionate about pulling everybody together and learning from each other across South Yorkshire. So I said I'd be quick. That wasn't very quick.
Do you want to say something? They've got 2 people online.
No, but, brilliant, really great work. Really keen to support that. I'm Ruth from Simca. I suppose there's just a couple of questions. One, how well are you linked in with Chambers of Commerce around work? How well are you linked in with our machinery around the sort of careers hub, business support, etc. And also the links across to kind of criminal justice system, because we know there's a lot of people with learning disabilities and autism that get caught into the criminal justice system and find it really difficult to get out. And there was another point. Oh, and just a general question. Do the employment leads from the trusts or our big anchors, do they meet? Is there a forum that they meet regularly? Is that what happens, Christy?
I don't know who I am. I'm Sheena.
Yes.
What you say.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do meet together. So this is an ideal opportunity for us to bring that to them. Actually,
I've got Nigel, then Alexis. Nigel.
Yeah, just really quickly. I mean, really happy with that presentation. Thank you very much. I mean, I just want to comment on one thing. I mean, I think it, obviously in terms of things being joined up, it's excellent. And there's a role there to be played by all public bodies, certainly in terms of not just a job interview guarantee scheme, but a job guarantee scheme, effectively, where somebody will go through a course of training, buddying up, supporting, mentoring, and then effectively walk out of it, potentially with a qualification at the end of it with a job, which I think is something that we all need to look at, really, if I'm perfectly honest. But what I wanted to comment on is how radical but right is the thought around lived experience consultancy road being paid the correct rate. As public bodies, we spend thousands every single year, every quarter, every month, every week to consultants, and this is about value. And if we really do value people's lived experience and their obviously their journey that they've been through, excuse me, we should obviously as an organisation be prepared to actually remunerate for that. So certainly Simca, local authorities, NHS, DWP, and all obviously public bodies need to start looking at that very carefully, because from my perspective, I think that's really putting your money where your mouth needs to go.
Thank you, Nigel. Alexis.
So 2 or 3 things. First of all, just want to say incredibly supportive of this, Kelly, and I'm actually just thinking that actually our work that we've got in the South Yorkshire accommodation with care work would dovetail actually quite nice into some of the work we're taking. So I think first of all, a big thank you to the team, and I really highly support this. 2 or 3 things is locally we have a learning disability strategy, the big plan, and also an autism strategy. And basically they were both co-produced, and very much what was really kind of highlighted as part of that was actually very much the focus on actually lifelong learning and opportunities for employment were key kind of priorities. And for me, just listening to the presentation, I think it's a really great opportunity to look at South Yorkshire as that added value of us coming together and actually doing something really meaningful and co-produced that would ultimately improve outcomes for people. And interestingly, when I look at the ASCOF outcomes, which are social work outcomes nationally, they're actually quite low across South Yorkshire. In terms of the experiences and outcomes for people in terms of a lifelong learning and employment. So I think this is a really good way of actually we could come together to not only do something quite different and innovative that would ultimately improve outcomes, but actually also secondly, I think it's something which we could do a tangible project around actually showing a measurable improvement, particularly in terms of these national outcomes for all individuals across South Yorkshire. So I'm very happy to support that and happy to touch base afterwards as to what I can do to support.
Thank you, Alexis. That was great, really helpful. Thank you very much. 2 or 3 messages for us, which is this is not for someone else to do. We're going to look at ourselves and our employment practices. And so can we just, if we did nothing else, if we went away and said, I'm going to go back and do that, I think we'll have made a great difference. Thank you. Really good presentation. Thanks for your time. Nice to see you guys. Thank you. You're welcome to stay, by the way. I realise it's not the most interesting thing in the world, but you are. Yeah, that's what they all say. Thank you. We're now moving on to the creative health strategy.
That's me again.
Are you
Me
doing the introduction?
and Lucy.
I saw Lucy online. You're going to introduce.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So there are two of us from the Creative Health Working Group. Lucy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm the Director of Arts and Health over at Darts. We're a participatory arts charity in Doncaster.
And people may remember when we did a group of about 6, 7 practitioners and leaders did an input on creative health and the involvement that with creative and cultural experiences and the impacts that that can have on people's positive health and well-being. We got a mandate from that meeting to go away and develop a creative health strategy for South Yorkshire based on that discussion as one of our enabling strategies. So that's been kind of written back into the ICP strategy. And we pulled together a small working group from across the 4 local authorities and different practices, including research institutes as well, to start looking at, to progress that and start looking at what the scope of that would be. So we're coming back today to ask for approval to establish a broader South Yorkshire Creative Health Board who would lead on the development of that strategy, would engage with different partners across the system really widely, and make sure that we develop the strategy with strong ownership from across the system. So I'm just going to hand over to Lucy and she'll just tell you a little bit about where we've got to in terms of defining the scope of the strategy, and then we'll come back just to look at some approvals and recommendations that we have for you.
Thanks, Kathy. So the South Yorkshire Creative Health Board, we want to influence creative health commissioning in order to scale up effective and inclusive arts and health programmes across South Yorkshire. So that's clarified. That's what we want to do. At the presentation I gave back in July, we also looked very clearly how that can make a key contribution to the ICS's strategy vision. We talked about the bold ambitions, particularly how they link to specific areas such as early years, focus on prevention, and then also that workforce as well. So we talked, if you remember, about not just the creative health force, but also the health and social care workforce. The change that we want to see in terms of summarising from this document is more people accessing creative activities, resulting in them feeling happier, healthier, and more resilient. And the work itself focused very, very strongly on people who have the greatest health inequalities. The strategy that we're developing at the moment, the aim with it is, I'm just going to pull out 5 key points that we're working on. So first of all, we want to embed creative health across the work of the ICP in the system. At the moment, we have pockets of absolutely excellent practice that is being recognised nationally and internationally, but we're working as a team across South Yorkshire of health professionals and creative professionals to make sure that that learning is shared and that people have equal access. We want to develop an effective infrastructure. We want to showcase best practice and collect robust evaluation. So as Kathy mentioned, we have strong links with academic organisations such as Sheffield Hallam University and University of Leeds. We want to source coordinated funding, and that might come from a range of places such as Arts Council, Integrated Care, grants, trusts, foundations, etc. And also we will be contributing to the national strategic development of creative health. So there's 3 key things that have come up that's worth having a look at if you want to look at in a bit more detail that are also influencing how we write our strategy and how we work. So the latest Creative Health Review was just launched in December. That highlights the potential for creative health to tackle some of the most pressing issues in health and social care. It addresses health inequalities, but there's also shed loads of evidence there about how you evidence value for money and also funding models. There are particular elements in there if you're interested in mental health, end of care, all sorts of stuff within that. Interestingly, there's also the new Creative Health Toolkit, which just launched a week and a half ago. That's the National Centre for Creative Health, and they've worked with a number of ICBs to develop the toolkit to allow other ICBs to embed creative health into their system. So that looks really clearly at the enablers and the barriers to commissioning creative health work. So I think that's going to be incredibly useful. And a really brilliant piece of news. I think we need to wait officially another week before we can announce it, but we and other cultural organisations within Doncaster and also the Health Determinants Research Centre have been working with Sheffield Hallam University, who have been successful in securing £1.85 million for a UKRI, that's a UK Research and Innovation grant, specifically to look at creative health boards, with Doncaster essentially as the model of good practice, looking at how we scale that across South Yorkshire and then nationally. So that's a 3-year piece of work, then hopefully we can come back and talk to you about at some point. So just to finish up, and this is one of the things that Kathy and I wanted to talk to you and just get your input on, is the proposed membership of the South Yorkshire Creative Health Board. So as you'll see from the paper that we sent through, we have a clear indication of the broad range of people that we would like on there. So we'd like your input on this. So we're looking at a integrated care partnership lead, one person from each local authority who's a creative health representative who can also then feed back into the health and wellbeing boards, academic and research institutes, representation from the community and voluntary sector, representation from the Integrated Care Board and SIMCA reps, particularly looking around probably wider determinants, health inequalities and employment, and a representation from Arts Council and somebody from Culture, Health and Wellbeing Alliance, which is the national organisation. And then, of course, creative health practitioners. Interesting, as part of the UKRI grant, we've also got co-investigation groups, and that will be people with lived experience who are experiencing the creative health programmes that we run as well. So we're trying to get a real diverse representation from across the South Yorkshire community and geography. So really, it is a whistle-stop tour. I had 4 minutes, so I hope that's helpful, Kathy, and I will pass over to you now.
Thanks a million, Lucy. That was really comprehensive. So our asks to you are to endorse putting in place, establishing a South Yorkshire Creative Health Board who will work with all of the different elements in the system to lead the development of the creative health strategy. Secondly, to give us some feedback as to whether you think that the kind of broad composition of the membership, as we've outlined in the paper, do you think is broadly representative of the diversity and the geography of our communities and the sectors? And then I think to delegate making further approaches to kind of broaden the membership to the board itself. And then I suppose we're interested in having a development session, a workshop session with you to really help you shape the strategy as well. So if we could pencil that in for March after we've had our first Creative Health Board, that would be very, very useful. So those are the kind of key questions really that we're posing to you today.
Kathy, thank you. David.
I'm really totally and absolutely behind this initiative. I think it's fantastic. I'm a total believer in the importance of the wider determinants of health, and all I can do within my role in Rotherham to help move this forward, I will do so. We did have a meeting yesterday within Rotherham, which included one of our cultural leads, and again, everybody in that meeting was totally enthusiastic about moving this forward. So for me, this is a better bit. In terms of the comments you asked about membership, I think it is broadly fine, but sort of struck me is that I assume that what you want to do, or what we want to do, is deliver things, to deliver strategy, deliver outcomes. So therefore, when it says academic research institutes with no limit so far for membership, I think that's just too broad. Yes, you may need to do some research, but you know, is it open-ended? So I think really you need to sort of say, is it 2 reps or whatever? I certainly feel that creative health practitioners, again, that's just left of no set number. I'm not trying to suggest how many should be, but I think they really need to be there, because we do need people involved in this who are really going to be involved in the delivery and making sure it works favourably. I think the last point I'll make, which is not one of your asked, but it's in the paper, is that to get this through our health and wellbeing boards, local authority health and wellbeing boards, cabinets and councils. Again, I did like in the information that came out before that link to the health and wellbeing boards, and I think that is important. But quite honestly, perhaps rather than different, but if I said to our leader, we need to endorse this through our cabinet or council report, they would say it doesn't need to go there. It just needs to go to the health and wellbeing boards on there. And the other point that came up yesterday, as I say, it was total support yesterday from the people who talked about it, is that I hope the strategy will also look at the outputs, how we measure achievement, because I think that is also important, that we know something definitely has come out of this. I'm sure it will, but we need to have that voting from the start. So totally endorse this.
Thank you, David. Greg.
Thanks. I agree with Councillor Roche in every respect. To add sort of approval for a board, is it a movement or a board? Is it kind of what you want? It's kind of a snowballing set of activity rather than a big board, etc. Local authority membership, I'm not sure that we have a creative and health person in my local authority. We've got plenty of creative people and plenty of health people. I don't think we have creative health people. And there'll be some overlaps and all that kind of stuff. Last point on the sort of the research grant, rather than a sort of a focus on is participation in culture good for you? We know that. I've seen a 15,000 page WHO systematic review. What does a thriving sector look like, and how do we sustain this sort of getting under the skin of it? I think would be much more useful focus of research. So just three thoughts, but yeah, wholeheartedly support as per other people.
You were the name that came to my mind when I thought about a creative health person in Sheffield, Greg. But you know,
he's all things to all people. Really quickly, I mean, I think we've already got a movement around creative health, but what we don't have is a consistent and strategic approach about embedding it across the system in South Yorkshire. And so I suppose it is very much about creating a bit of a plan to embed it in our settings, but also to really equip and skill up the capability of the workforce, to both the cultural workforce and the health and care workforce, to feel really confident in using creative health in their work. I think the second thing is that there's already a phenomenal evidence base, and a phenomenal research base that proves the benefits and the impact of this work. So what we don't want to reinvent the wheel and do lots more kind of primary research. What we want to do is just pull on the research that we have again to look at action. In terms of the right people, you know, finding the creative person and the health person, I think in each of the local authority areas where we've socialised this already through health and wellbeing boards and co-constructed it, it's what we will find that this is about a coming together of individuals who are part of the creative cultural workforce and part of the health and care workforce, and that's going to be a bit of a pattern as the plan develops and evolves. But we really thank you so much for the endorsement. We'll take it as a kind of call to action, and we'll just progress it, and we'll bring back further updates as and when. Anything else you want to add just as a closing remark, Lucy?
No, not at all. I really appreciate that. Thanks for the time.
Lucy, Kathy, thank you very much. Take that as endorsement. That's great. Okay, thank you. We've got two updates now. The first one is Katie on involvement strategy refresh. Start with people. Katie. Hiya.
Thank you. So for anybody who doesn't know me, I'm Katie Davison. I'm Deputy Director of Involvement at NHS South Yorkshire. So I've just brought our Start with People strategy to talk to you about today. It is our citizen involvement strategy, and we're refreshing it. Next slide, please. So that is our strategy. So I'm just going to take you back and give you a bit of background. We were required by law to have a strategy when we became an ICB. Nationally, they call them people and community strategies. We call ours our Start with People strategy. When we wrote our strategy, we did undertake to work with our communities and stakeholders as widely as possible, but there were a number of limitations when we did that. One being timescales nationally, another one being the ICP wasn't in place. So in terms of involving our partners, we were limited. Another one being we were a new organisation, so we sort of knew that things would likely change as the organisation more clearly found its way. So to acknowledge that, we put a review date of a year on our strategy. We've also since then had some feedback from our partners about not feeling particular ownership of it or involvement in its development, which I think, as I said, is fair. We were limited by the circumstances at the time. So really, I'm trying to get out there and attend as many of these meetings as I can to make sure that we've got all partners involved in it. It's really key, even though this is an ICB strategy, that it is a partnership approach to involving our citizens. Otherwise, we just risk confusing them by going out and talking to them in different ways at different times about different things. We overlap quite often with when we touch things. So whilst this is an ICB strategy, we're taking the opportunity in the refresh of working with all of our partners in a very collaborative way, which will hopefully lead to a whole system approach to involvement being better. You probably have noticed that we are past the year deadline. What we did in February last year, we did put on our website that we were going to be refreshing it, and we gave people an email address should they wish to share their views at that time. There were a number of other big pieces of work that you're very aware of: the ICP strategy involvement, the JFP plan involvement, and various other things that meant that my team weren't able to give it the focus that we wanted to do it justice in the review. So we delayed it a little bit, but we are now in earnest looking at refreshing it and getting people's involvement in that. Next slide, please. So what's happened between writing the strategy and now? I don't want anybody to think that nothing's happened. So whilst we haven't rewritten the strategy in that time, there's been plenty of work happening, both on a sort of delivery of involvement side of things. So we've obviously, as I've mentioned, had the ICP strategy involvement, the JFP involvement. You might be aware of the GP practice consultations that have happened in Sheffield and Doncaster. There's some end of life care work happened, autism. So lots of children and young people's health equity work. So lots of involvement work happening during that time, and lots of sort of back end stuff happening to improve the systems for involvement. Hopefully you'll be aware of the South Yorkshire Insights Bank, which is a big key piece of work that's developing quite nicely. So what we've tried to do whilst we've been doing this work is making sure that any evolutions fit across with all of the work that's happening in the system. So you'll notice from this slide, hopefully the first of the top 3 goals is from the ICB strategy. The second one is a goal of the organisation. The third one is a commitment from this ICP. So what we've done is try to make sure we're tying everything together much more neatly and succinctly. The 10 principles that are on this slide were nationally suggested principles from NHS England. When we did our strategy in the first place, we did engage on these across South Yorkshire. We actually rewrote them for South Yorkshire versions at one point, but actually the feedback that we got from everybody was that these national ones were largely sound. They're in our commitment, so we've stuck with those. And what the team and I have done is we've looked at these principles. We've said, okay, what outcomes would demonstrate that we're achieving these? What would the outputs look like? What would the actions look like? And then we've grouped those actions into the 3 priorities that you see at the bottom of that slide. And then next slide, please. Those 3 priorities are the ones that have made it into the joint forward plan in terms of our involvement priorities for the year just gone, but these are very broad priorities and there's quite a lot to do on them, so they will likely be for the next year as well. Next slide, please. So taking you back to where we're at with the strategy refresh, we launched our citizen involvement elements of the refresh last week, but we did a lot to get us to that stage. So in November, we held a workshop with all the involvement leads from across the system and with some citizen representatives. We looked at involvement strategies that were already in existence across South Yorkshire. We looked at other ICB and system strategies. We looked at what our citizen involvement from when we launched our original strategy told us in 2022. We critiqued the existing strategy and we came up with some thoughts about what we might want to change. And the citizen involvement activity that we're doing now is largely testing those out. So that's the front cover of a involvement plan that we've published. We've tried to make it visually appealing. It's 6 pages long. There is a link to it on the final slide, but we've already had some really good feedback from people on the involvement plan, saying that it really takes people on the journey and explains to them where we've got to, why we've got there, and where we want to go next, and how we want to hear their views in that process. Next slide, please.
In terms of our stakeholder involvement, as I've mentioned, I've been making sure I've been trying to get around all of these meetings to make sure everybody is at least aware of what we're doing and has the opportunity to input. So I'm here today. Obviously, we're attending the Joint Health Overview Scrutiny Committee next month. I've attended the system leadership meeting that's got all the NHS organisations in it. There's a Children and Young People's Alliance Community of Interest meeting that I've attended, place committees, staff meetings, etc. But the one key thing that I did want to say is that we recognise that the voluntary sector and Health Watch are really key partners in the citizen involvement space. So we've got a workshop next week. We are oversubscribed for that workshop, more than 60 people wanting to come along and look at how we can co-design a partnership approach to citizen involvement with the voluntary sector. Really excited about that element. Next slide, please. Going back to involving our citizens, so the two columns on the left really show you the breadth of opportunities we're offering for people to get involved. These have been shared on our social networks, in our bulletins, to partners with the ask of them sharing to bulletins, etc. Please do give your comms colleagues a nudge if you could, and we'll give them another nudge on Monday when we see them all. The more that people share this, the better it'll get out there and the more that we'll get people's views. However, recognising that all of those approaches do generally hit the people who are more attuned, more tuned into us, more likely to follow our socials, more likely to give us their views willingly. So obviously we also have to do a piece of work to go and talk to our communities who are less able to do that. So we're working with Health Watch again, as we did with the JFP involvement work. And actually, again, we've got a really nice piece of work with the Health Watchers that we've commissioned from them. So we're ticking three boxes with it in terms of, in the nicest possible sense of ticking boxes. We are going to go back to the communities that we worked with when we did the joint forward plan involvement and talk to them about what we've done with the information they gave us, which is a really key part of involvement, but one of the bits that we're quite honestly not very good at. So that's really nice. At the same time, we're going to say to them, how did you find that involvement? How can we do it better? What would you like us to do differently? Which will help inform the Start with People strategy refresh, and then talking to them about the refresh of the joint forward plan at the same time. We're also working with Kelly and colleagues who were here earlier from the Mental Health Learning Disability Alliance to make sure we hear the voices from that community, and the Children and Young People's Alliance and the Maternity Alliance, again, to make sure we hear those voices. And then final slide is just the link to the citizen involvement plan that I mentioned earlier. Please do take a look, and we'll share the slides so that you can press on the link. But yeah, I should say as well, we did set up a readers panel as well, so that we had input from citizens in terms of putting the copy for the plan together and for the survey. So just to finish, really thanking system partners for their support today. As I mentioned, we had quite a lot of involvement leads from across the system in a meeting with us. So there's a really good community of interest developing, I think, around involvement in South Yorkshire.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Sorry, I'm conscious that Piers has done such a great job in my absence of keeping us to time. I'm going to look ridiculous if I then run over time as soon as I come back. So I'm really
I was hoping for that.
So sorry to jump in. Does anybody have any urgent comments or questions? Just I am conscious of time. I know people do need to leave promptly at 3:30. So questions online. So I can't see who. Alexis, please.
Yeah. It was just a suggestion when I comment is what I'm mindful there's quite a lot of work going on in the involvement space already, and I can think of actually a range of things that's going on within Sheffield, in particular around co-production and involvement. And what I'm quite keen to connect that into this piece of work, because I think that for me, I think one of the bits of feedback we actually did quite recently quite a big event around learning from our Change and Futures programme, and one of the feedback was there's actually quite a lot going on. It's not quite connected across, and I think for me, when I'm looking at that, I'm not sure how that's connected into our wider work that's going on in Sheffield. So there's a bit, to me, just a bit of a disconnect rather than connection. So I think what would be really helpful to go and do, I'm thinking, is actually look at how do we, community. I think it's a great idea about community of interest and community of practice, and actually start to think about this strategically across the piece. But I think it would be really helpful, I think, to start to look into the wider connections. So there's also a bit for me around the health and wellbeing boards locally, because I know, for me, we look at this particularly within the health and wellbeing board context as well, and also other contexts. So for me, it's just about a bit of a strategic mapping and shaping around this, because I think certainly the feedback is sometimes I get for individuals is is there's many people trying to ask me the same question. So how do we actually think about what we're trying to do? So just a thought around that.
Thank you. Any other urgent comments or questions? No, I've sufficiently scared people off. Okay, good. That was the aim. Good. Okay, thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Okay, on to the next item, please, which is an item clearly close to my heart, which is the Health Equity Advisory Panel from Professor Alan Walker.
Afternoon, everybody. So, very quick verbal update from me. Thank you. As you know, the Health Equity Panel was established last year to produce an action plan aimed at extending healthy life expectancy and reducing health inequalities in South Yorkshire. And it comprises 20 experts from a wide range of backgrounds, overwhelmingly local, I should say. So we're drawing on the experience and expertise on our own patch. We met between March and December, and the collective aim has been so far to produce a future-oriented aspirational plan for health and well-being in South Yorkshire. That's a plan that focuses on every stage of the life course, from birth, being born safely and in good health, to maintaining health and well-being in later life and dignified death. The key aspirations in the plan have been agreed by the panel, along with a lot of specific recommendations for action. These were generated, first of all, on the basis of existing research and panel expertise, and then local experts in each of the 4 authorities in South Yorkshire were asked to cross-examine the work of the panel. And on the basis of that, so in a sense, we had a subsidiary panel of same size as the main panel that cross-examined our work and made various recommendations which were then taken on board. And then we undertook in November a community consultation exercise with around 80 representatives of local communities, community organizations, VC, SE, and local institutions. And again, our recommendations were modified, and actually quite a lot of the framing of our aspirations were modified as well on the basis of this extensive community feedback. So from the start, the panel has taken the view that what we need is a bold new approach. And as some panel members have put it, a movement for change. This is a long-term aspirational movement for change. The deep-seated inequalities in South Yorkshire are not going to be overcome within 5 years, possibly not within 10 years. And incremental change, we've argued, is no longer viable in the face of that, the scale of those challenges. We're also being very clear about whose responsibility it is to act. We know that the MCA can lead on certain aspects of this agenda, while other aspects have to be joint action between the 4 civic authorities of South Yorkshire. Still, other actions that would have, let's say, the biggest impact on health inequalities, like ending child poverty, are far beyond the influence of local authorities or the ICP or the MCA. But our leaders in South Yorkshire can lobby national government to try to change benefits and benefit approaches in order to try to reduce the scale of poverty and inequality nationally. We set out the case, we will set out when you get to see it, the case for radical action, why incrementalism will no longer suffice. We make the case in various terms, including economic terms. Poor health and inequality is a big drag on the South Yorkshire economy. And if nothing else, there must be an impetus to try to improve the position, particularly for those employees that suffer ill health and are forced to leave the labour market, or once out of the labour market, not able to get back in because they suffer from poor physical health and poor mental health. And we also make the case for why South Yorkshire should operate in unison. not just an issue to be taken up in the four authorities, but the added value of those four authorities combining together to address this agenda. And I hope that will be persuasive. So in terms of timetable, the core work of the panel has been completed. I think we've got the material to include in a section on key data to outline the extent of inequalities and the extent of the challenge facing us. We've collected good practices from the four authorities, so we know that there are important initiatives taking place that we will proclaim in the report. And what we need to do now is just finalize the overview, the introductory section, and develop a timeline for the actions. And I should emphasize in this room that all the way through, we've been conscious of the fact that we need to add value to what the ICP strategy does. This is not about reinventing the wheel or repeating or egging on in any way that strategy is by saying it's a way of saying what additional do we need to do in this region in order to achieve the ambition that Oliver has boldly stated. And finally, I'll just apologise to you, Chair, for the slippage in the timetable. I should say this is not a consultancy project. Okay, no one is being paid to do it. And basically, we rely on the goodwill of a lot of very busy people, including Ruth and myself.
Thank you. I hope you don't mind me. You confided that you were maybe not having a holiday in order to be able to complete this work. So I think we all kind of appreciate the effort that you're putting in to this. I'm really grateful to you, and I would really like to invite you back when we do launch the inquiry findings in order to be able to come and offer more time, a fuller exposition around kind of the work that you've done. Again, conscious of time, does anybody have any urgent questions, Catherine?
What do you think are the implications of this overarching life course focused framework for how we work together as a system?
Just a small question there from Kathy. That was,
yeah. Thanks for that.
We do need to go at 3:30, but yes, Alan.
In a deep dive later on, Alan. Sorry about that.
Brilliant. Any perhaps more brief questions? Not talking about whole system change at this point. Yeah, Angela, and then Stephen, please.
Just a very quick comment. It's just that it would be good to understand how it fits in with all the work that the separate kind of authorities are already doing. For example, in Sheffield, we've just done all the consultation on the city goals, and health is a big part of that, and that's in partnership. So we've already done that, and we're just looking at rewriting our health and wellbeing board strategies. So it's important that again that kind of making connections so that we don't work in silos and we do the same things in three different places.
Bring Stephen's question in as well, just so you can answer them both at the same time.
So mine's a very quick comment, which just to reflect upon what the way I just love the way that Alan framed this piece of work, which I think is the thing that we hold on to, because this is an enormously significant piece of work for us. It's something that Alan has done under the auspices of this reporting to you. But just a reflection really that first of all, this is being done because we recognise early doors and we know that actually we've got to do something significantly different, both in terms of what we do and how we do it. And Alan's described that, firstly. Secondly, the provenance of this work is based upon people from expertise in this region doing a lot of work for themselves. So it's a product of all of that. Thirdly, it's going to say what we need to do as individual organisations, what we need to do differently as a system, and actually what we need to go banging on the door of government around. And I think the way that that's been framed, Oliver, is exactly where we need it to be.
Alan, did you want to come back on Angela's question?
I will emphasise it's a collective effort, absolutely, and there'll be no single name on it. It's a collective effort. About Angela's point, I couldn't agree more. And the problem is, when you're considering this over a 6 to 9 month period, everything changes, doesn't it? The strategy develops. There's a new health and wellbeing strategy emerging, a health and arts strategy, and so on and so on. So what we've relied on very strongly is the presence of the 4 directors of public health. And believe me, they have kept us as up to date as they can with local developments. So under each of the 10 core aspirations, what we've done is to rehearse what the ICP strategy says, and then we've said what the local health and wellbeing boards say, although that is problematic, because in some authorities, what's covered by the Health and Wellbeing Board is not the same as in another authority. So there's a real risk that if we start to list the things that Health and Wellbeing Boards are doing, one of the authorities is going to put its hand up and say, sorry, we're doing that, but it's not in the Health and Wellbeing Board strategy. It's elsewhere in the authorities. So we need to be a little careful there. But I do accept completely the need to integrate what we're doing with local strategies. And we have had a conversation, as it happens earlier today, about meeting the chairs of the Health and Wellbeing Board. And there is a meeting in the diary, and meeting the council leaders to make sure that this is properly integrated locally, because none of this is going to work unless there is a collaboration between the 4 authorities. And if for any reason one or more walk away from it, it won't work. So it has to be a system-wide, South Yorkshire-wide initiative.
Thank you. And I will add my weight to those engagements with obviously leaders and local authority colleagues, and we'd appreciate your support in doing that in Sheffield, of course. Okay, thank you very much. Could we move on to the ICP operational group, please, from Will?
I won't make you late, I promise.
Thank you.
Can I just 3 things? So firstly, a thank you to the group, because they do continue to meet every month to support the work of this group and the agendas that come through. Second thing is, remember we talked a lot about how we bring together folks that are already leading in some of the spaces, so the bold ambition spaces, and starting to and recognising and valuing that work. That started to happen with some supporting materials as well. So, and we describe that as a position statement, but the theme around trying to sort of connect some of the work that we're doing and making sure that it really does do that bit of adding value, and we don't do any duplicating, that's happening. I was in one of those spaces from a Children and Young People's perspective, but there was a wider group as well, so we're recognising wider folks in that, and the sort of the initial feedback from that group, what it's really happy to sort of step into that space and hold that space for us as an integrated care partnership. They'll come back with a bit more detail than that, but essentially it was a really positive discussion between a range of different leaders from across South Yorkshire, including the CYP Alliance as well. So that was really positive. The other thing I just wanted to update on is, remember back in November we had a meeting both in public and a development session, which was around research and innovation. David led that session, supported by Sarah Drew, many folks here engaged in that. One of the things that we talked about was how we might be able to do something across South Yorkshire that really recognised and valued some of the great work that we are doing. So some sort of innovation expo. There's been some sort of early thinking about what one might look like, and therefore I'd want to just signpost to our future meeting that will bring some of that back. It's starting to get some ideas and really think about how we do that really well. And I'll leave it there so you're not late, unless Kathy's got anything further to add. Sorry, it's forgotten. I don't want to make us late.
I'm scared to say anything.
A rule with an iron fist. This is how it works. Thank you.
Or a velvet glove.
Okay, it says here concluding comments and any other business. Is there any other business that anybody wants to bring in? Yeah.
Sorry, I'll be very quick. I just want this recorded because I think they need discussion in future. I have 2 items. One is about recognising the value of voluntary sector and putting our money where our mouth is when we refer to voluntary sector organisation, particularly from the health service. We need to pay for that because funding is really complex and really difficult at the moment for all voluntary sector organisation. I'm talking from the point of view of someone who also works in the voluntary sector or in the voluntary sector. And we need to not burden the voluntary sector. We need to fund it properly, both from a local authority point of view, a regional point of view, and an NHS point of view. And finally, it's been brought to my attention by quite a few constituents about the dire situation of transport to and from hospital, both in terms of public transport, but also in terms of taxis. And particularly, I've had a case lately where someone was waiting for a taxi from the Northern General for such a long time, being discharged, that their medication, their pain relief medication had worn out and they were in real distress. So can we put that on the agenda at some point somewhere? Because it's really important from the medical point of view.
Agree. And I think that's point well made. So thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing, which is that it brought to my attention earlier. I should have known that Rupert Suckling, member of this board, has been off ill, is retiring at the end of January. I just thought we should just recognise that.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to, for the record, say, and thank you to Rupert for his work.
Huge thanks to Rupert and for all of the work that he's done, and not just as part of this group, but over the course of his career, particularly with Doncaster, and contributions that he's made has been a wonderful thing, and we wish him all the best. So Kathy.
Can we send him an e-card maybe that we could all collectively sign?
Yeah, absolutely, brilliant. It's just for me to say then one last thing, which is there is currently a consultation going on about the transfer of powers of the Police and Crime Commissioner's office into the office of the Mayor. It would be remiss of me not to invite you all to contribute to that consultation. It's a Home Office consultation. You can Google it, but it's also on all my social media. It's on the website of Simca. I would obviously appreciate it if you supported that. I think it is good for us as a group because it allows us, I think, more oversight and connections between a lot of the different policy functions of the police and this group through this office. But clearly you are entitled to your own views, but I would appreciate any support you might be able to do. The consultation closes on the 31st, so it's quite an urgent request that if you haven't filled that in already, please. It's really short document, so it doesn't take forever by any stretch of the imagination. It will take you 5 minutes. So if you could do that, that would be much appreciated. Was there anybody else that wanted to come in?
Sorry, Chair, I just wanted to we're recognising sort of people's contribution. I'm just mindful it's Councillor Roach's last meeting.
And he was wanting to run off all too quickly before we remembered.
Not recognise and value that.
I thought you were here in March, David.
Yes, I am, yeah.
There we go.
That's why I didn't
Brilliant.
mention it, Will.
Mine, Councillor Roach's
Seamless. Seamless. Okay, brilliant, everyone. Thank you very much. And we're bang on time. Look at that. A joint effort. Thank you.